Hello and welcome to another Sunday live stream. I'm here with Brian Niemeier. Brian Niemeier is a best-selling science fiction author and John W. I almost said John C. right there. John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer finalist. His second book, Soul Dancer, won the first ever Dragon Award for Best Horror Novel. And its sequel, The Secret Kings, became a 2017 Dragon Award finalist for Best Science Fiction Novel. Brian chose to pursue a writing career despite formal training in history and theology. His journey toward publication began at the behest of his long suffering gaming group, who tactfully pointed out that he seemed to enjoy telling stories more than planning and educating games. Brian, how are you doing today?
Oh, it's crunch time, so I'm busy, but not too busy to make time for my superversive friends, for you, Ben, and for all your listeners. So I'm pleased to be here.
All four of them. Now, uh, you have an Indiegogo campaign that I've linked in the chat. Combat Frame XSeed. Why don't you tell us about that?
It's Mobile Suit Gundam meets Tom Clancy.
Ooh, that's a spicy little meatball there. So, Mobile Suit Gundam, of course, that's giant mechs and guns and space stations and all that jazz. Which is always cool. Like guys screaming and Gundam pilots while the robots punch each other is just. But what about the Tom Clancy? Where does Tom Clancy's resurrected corpse come into play?
Oh, if only it would.
Right.
Yeah. No. Combat Frame XSeed is sort of the flagship title in a small, I hesitate to say literary movement, shall we say, group of like-minded authors who've gathered on Twitter around the hashtag A Gundam for Us.
Ooh.
And I believe that you had another one of us, Bradford Walker, on a few weeks ago to talk about his project, the Star Knight Saga, which is also under the aegis. Excellent. So you know where I'm coming from.
Yes.
And what we noticed is that, like Hollywood and like American comics and like video games, Japanese anime has a major storytelling problem as well. And the mecha genre in particular is largely seen as moribund right now.
Yes.
And whereas in comics, the real asteroid kill shot event was Watchmen. When Alan Moore put out Watchmen in the early 80s, as Daddy Warpig and I discussed yesterday.
I still need to see that.
Yeah, recommended.
Oh, yeah.
But DW brought up that industry professionals made the mistake of taking Watchmen seriously, so that now this deconstructive, rather nihilistic take on the superhero comic is seen as this towering seminal critique of Cape Comics that from now on, anyone who wants to publish a superhero comic must contend with more. You've got to answer that critique in order to be taken seriously. And that's just led to deconstructions of the deconstruction of the deconstruction until now. Comics and even Hollywood are ashamed of superheroes. They've always got to try to inject realism. Mm-hmm. They hate the nicknames. They hate the colorful costumes. Everything's got to be dark. Now, for those who may not be familiar, something similar happened in mecha anime in Japan, but instead of Watchmen, their second impact for those who will get the pun was Neon Genesis Evangelion, which introduced nihilism and subversion with a thin veneer of Kabbalistic and Christian theology to make it look smart to people that know any better, right?
Right.
And but really, Anno admitted he didn't know what he was doing and he was making it up as he went along.
And according
So,
to certain sources, I have heard that he was clinically and almost suicidally depressed at that time while he was working on it.
yeah, this
Uh,
might be apocryphal, but I'd heard that when he finished, he locked himself in a hotel room and shaved all the hair off his body, all of it.
ugh. uh, I mean, I know that has certain significance for Japanese culture, but no, thank you. To be
Right.
hairless. Of course, I'm going bald. You see, so I'm ridiculously afraid of this.
And we're not
Uh,
going to take Dr. Evil's advice on this one. We're going to
right,
pass.
right, exactly. Uh, I agree with a lot of people about that I've talked to here about Neon Genesis Evangelion, and um, I do view, like, just so you know, I do believe that Watchmen and Galleon should exist. And of course, Alan Moore is too fearsome to defy to his face, him being a powerful wizard and all.
Right.
But I do believe it's gone too far. Like, the voices have been snuffed out. Whereas you could have like something very hopeful, very very bright, very heroic, or even like with something from Char's perspective from Gundam,
Mm-hmm.
where he's murdering the people he believes killed his father and any number of other things. We honestly we don't have even something like Char. And the most hopeful mecha show that I've seen recently has been them basically just refurbishing the original Gundam series, except this time with a backstory.tm for
Right.
Char and Mono and the rest of them, which is worth seeing. Don't get me wrong, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not new. I do enjoy fighting with Anthony Marchetta over Kill la Kill as a mecha anime, though I keep changing the goalposts to frustrate him.
Good. Well, I haven't seen that one, but you bring up an interesting point, which is that Gundam, the main mecha franchise that kicked off the real robot genre, has just become self-referential. It has to go
Mm-hmm.
back to the well again and again. So that's what we see in mecha anime is you get two types of show. Okay. You get the Eva clone, which is now
Gross.
obligatory, or you get Macross and Gundam just repeating the same shtick ad nauseum.
Yep.
You get this year's another retelling of the 1 Year War, right?
Thank you.
So
Ugh.
where the Tom Clancy comes in is I thought that a helpful approach for renewing, shall we say, the mecha genre would be to infuse it with some fresh blood and some more Western tropes and storytelling structures, like three-act
Mm-hmm.
structure, being more conflict driven, having protagonists who want something and who are heroes who do heroic things, and combat real evil, not just someone who's misunderstood, not someone who, well, if you look at it from his point of view, he's got a perfectly good argument. And the only difference between hero and villain is the POV. Nah, I'm dealing with someone who, like Jack Ryan,
Mm-hmm.
is fighting for what he believes in, fighting for his nation and what he ultimately believes to be the good. And then also the reason I choose Tom Clancy, although you could substitute Jason Bourne or James Bond or Solid Snake, but really any patriot who has a moral ethical code
Mm-hmm.
is fighting for the good to preserve life against hostile and often sinister forces. But it isn't a white knight on a horse, right? Sometimes these are men who feel they have to get their hands dirty to accomplish the good, and we can discuss the morality of that another time. But that's where the Mil SF element comes in, right? You've got Space Marines, you've got mecha pilots, you have
Mm-hmm.
people who have to follow orders or face the consequences. They have to make tough judgment calls in the field when you don't have time to consult Aquinas of the School of Salamanca on just war theory. But they do the best they can. They make mistakes. They stumble, but then they get back up.
Yes, absolutely. And that's honestly, it sounds like it's going to be a breath of fresh air. With a lot of what I've seen with the Pulp Rev apparently now a Gundam for us. Apparently I'm really missing out by not being on Twitter. But then I remember it's Twitter.
Yeah, you're missing all the shadow bannings and sudden banishments of your followers.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, is there a point to it? Because I figure John Del Raz hit it just right in the Twilight, but ever since then it's diminishing returns, which is of course probably prescient to how a lot of people view their Gundam properties.
Right.
And I use Gundam in I should say mecha property. Excuse me. Yeah. So what got you on the path to Combat Frame? Combat Frame XSeed. Like you said that you were on Twitter and you're talking about Gundam for us, and of course, when are we going to say a Monster Girl for us? But hey, you know what? That's going to come.
That was Soul Dancer.
Yeah. But so what made you decide? You know what? I've done some cosmic horror, personal horror sort of things. I've done sort of an artsy work with the Hymn of the Pearl, which I enjoyed very much. What made the skip there?
Well, it was more a matter of the moment being right, because as your listeners may or may not be aware, my Soul Cycle series was a long time in coming. It had a good decade and a half gestation period where I was working on it, refining it, even gaming out some of my notes to see how they'd work. And during that process, when I got fed up with doing kind of horror-infused metaphysical sword and sorcery / space opera stuff, I take a breather and go over and have fun playing with my giant robots. So I've actually been working on XSeed simultaneously with the Soul Cycle off and on for 15 years. So I'm coming to the table with a universe and a backstory that is as fleshed out as the Soul Cycles was. Now, I'm unleashing this on you now because I believe conditions are right.
My body is ready. Do it.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. Because I launched the Gundam for Us hashtag kind of on lark, just as a trial balloon, and people latched onto it. They flocked to the banner. I also then saw that MilSF is, if it's not the top selling science fiction genre right now, it's easily in the top 3. So I figured, okay,
it is the top selling by a margin. Last info graphic I saw.
Good. It sounds like we saw the same infographic.
Yep. Like it was just I of course I'd have to dig through John Del Raz's Facebook for a very long time, but the gist of it is, for our watchers, it goes like MilSF, then like romance, which is weird. Not romance. Is it horror? You know what? Never mind. Apparently, I can't remember it like I thought I did. But MilSF has a good third on like everything else, and some things just aren't really worth mentioning. Pull in 1,000, which is how it was. Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
No, that's fine. No problem. I think you cut out there for a second, but we're back.
For some reason, seeing gaps in my connection, but I thought they were over already. That's okay.
Understand.
If ever I just disappear, just do a song and dance, hello my honey, hello my darling, hello my ragtime gal, sort of thing.
Okay, well, while we were talking there, I did pull up the infographic.
Ooh.
So, yeah, the best-selling science fiction ebook unit sales by subgenre. Millisef is handily number one, then adventure, then post-apocalyptic, and for some reason they separate out dystopian and then space opera. So there's the top 5.
But yeah.
So I felt that the conditions were right. It was time to strike while the iron was hot, and
Absolutely.
yeah, I also wanted to follow the Nicole Jason Anspach route of releasing a series in fairly rapid succession. So I'm not just writing the first XSeed book, which is honestly done. It just needs one more pass once I get to all the beta reader feedback. But I'm currently writing a short story to bridge books 1 and 2, and I'm going to go straight into book 2. And the goal is to have book 2 finished and to be started on book 3, ideally by the time I launch the first Combat Frame XSeed novel in January 2019. And then the plan is to release a new XSeed novel every 60 days.
Ferocious.
Yeah, well, really, they say you should do it every 30 days, but I have not yet mastered writing at pulp speed, and I've also got my editing career on the side, so figured I'd manage expectations a bit.
No, and honestly, every 2 months is perfectly acceptable for a lot of things. I myself have delayed a series that I've written to finish my current novel called Cyber Gothic, which I think might be your flavor, to write a trilogy and then release it. Like, not obviously release the trilogy all at once. Keep it like a month, 2 month, whatever Jason Rennie, my publisher, thinks is wise. And then, of course, have the next trilogy ready by then, and then do my little one-shot novels that I like to write in between. What I hope will be the thing that lets me actually make money, because, of course, even though our art is eternal, we still have to eat.
Yes, you're here.
But let's see here. So I have recently I put in the publisher thing for the physical copy or the digital copy, and I'm looking down at it. What can I expect from it?
From Combat Frame XSeed?
Oh yes, in a more like, not in a, like, we've been sort of talking about meta things so far.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a more I'm opening it up for the first chapter. What am I going to see?
I want it crunchy. Well, actually, first of all, as a segue to inform your audience, I've got links to the first 3 chapters of the book on the Indiegogo campaign and on my blog. So you can find out exactly what's waiting. And also, if you don't have time to read, if you prefer audio, that's okay, because my good friend Jim Fear 138, professional audiobook narrator, has prepared a sample of the Combat Frame XSeed audiobook we're hoping to make if we reach our final $5,000 goal. And that sample, which encompasses chapter 1 of the book, is also linked from the Indiegogo.
Excellent.
So just FYI to the folks at home. But then I'm more than happy to discuss what you're going to find.
Please.
So you're right. What we said so far might make people think, oh, well, this is just some sort of dry academic exercise in story structure and tropes. No, let's disabuse you of that idea right now. No, it's been described as by one of my beta readers as a nonstop running gunfight.
Ooh.
It might be better to call it a series of running gunfights, but no, I definitely follow the Larry Correia school of making sure something explodes every 5,000 words.
That sounds like a good rule of thumb.
It is. It served him well, and I think it serves XSeed well. Because no, you have giant robots going at each other, winner take all, just cutthroat combat, guerrilla combat, mass invasions, honor duels. So I'm not just throwing the exact same kind of action at you every time I switch it up. There's also espionage. There's also cloak and dagger assassinations.
So there's a running. Sorry, I have to interrupt you there.
Hey.
I play a card game, and there's a card called Ninjarizer, which is a car that transforms into a ninja. So the running gag is that this ninja is just sitting in car form on like the roof of somebody's house. And then like, there's a nice Parisian street and this guy sees this car like ramping the roofs, sort of thing. All of a sudden they hear and it's like Ninja Riser strikes again and he just runs the guy over and then disappears into the shadows. But really you can see like the headlights of the car just crouching in the shadows, like not a good ninja, great assassin. Anyway, sorry, I had to think about giant robots like sitting there in the background, like not conspicuous at all with a knife, ready to get somebody. I like it. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
No problem. That's an interesting take on kind of a turbo teen what if. If he was taken in by the League of Shadows or something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But no, and it's not just giant robot combat. We do, of course, have actual gunfights between humans armed with light arms. We've got fist fights. We got sword fights. So my main goal, as always, is to be entertaining. And the reason for the meta stuff is I'm convinced it's the best way to entertain in this genre.
Yes.
It's why the genre has slid in entertainment factor in recent years. So it is in need of renewal, is the way I put it.
Fresh blood. And not the stuff that Tom Kratman spills, I'm sure, daily. But yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. Like thinking of Larry Correa, I haven't read as much of Tom Kratman as I have Larry Correa, sadly.
Those guys need to crucify themselves, Ben.
What?
He needs that's true. For lumber.
Hey, I've got this apple tree that just died. I'm willing to donate. But in Nemesis, Larry Correa's 5th Monster Hunter book, like I was thinking about it, and I realized the fight between Harbinger and Frank, where they basically tear up the mansion, is mostly pointless. And it's amazing. Like usually I'm very angry about when a book does something pointless. That was actually what got me stop reading Soul Dancer, when that demon showed up and he started beating on his own dudes, who were all elemental powers. Like I felt that was weird because even though he's a demon, he's their leader. And I wasn't like, it was introduced very suddenly and without the right drama and stuff like that. But Larry Correa did the same thing. And I don't mean this as a criticism of Soul Dancer. That book has some fine dust coating, just depth to it. But Larry Correa's Nemesis has the same sort of thing where Harbinger and Frank fight each other. And I guess he's following the 5,000 words at an explosion or something. But I just thought that was interesting when you mentioned it. Is that the sort of thing that you wanted to pull here, where it's like it could be a fight, it could be this or that, or a duel of honor on top of a spire in the middle of a hurricane or something? Classic.
The principle I'm following is that it's more of the Lester Dent approach, which is, you should regularly throw action at your readers, but never the same kind of action twice in succession. So it's just a matter of variety, because nothing makes readers stop reading like repetition. That's one thing that I tell my clients when I'm editing, is if they've got a lot of repetition, whether it's repeated ideas or a pet phrase they use repeatedly, or even two occurrences of the same strong noun or verb in the same paragraph.
Right.
Replace this with something just as strong but similar. And similarly, if your every 5,000 words action scene is a gunfight followed by another gunfight, well, that's repetitive.
Right.
You should make it a fist fight or a bomb exploding or a car chase or even
or the guns change up, any number of things. I was thinking of there's a video game called Enter the Gungeon, which is essentially you go into a dungeon with guns, except there's such variety of guns that every playthrough is different unless you happen to find the same guns. So you can pick up a gun that shoots pots, and then it bursts into like different weird star things, all number of creative things. So it makes it seem fresh. And I'm sure that's exactly what you're going for with this as well. Is that right?
Good way to put it.
Thank you. I'm pretty sold on this, Brian. I am percolating in the pleasure of something that sounds fresh, sounds fighting crazy and adventurous.
Excellent. Yeah, people have also called it an inversion of the first Mobile Suit Gundam in terms of the story.
I'm not your beta read or anything like that. But what do you mean by inverting the Gundam story? Like, I've got kind of like a timeline of Gundam events, but I don't have a strong enough picture to be able to say, yes, I exactly know what they mean.
Right, that's fine. I have no problem explaining for the benefit of you and your listeners. So, the basic overview of the first Mobile Suit Gundam is that due to overpopulation and environmental and economic pressures, Earth's one world government, the Earth Federation, builds space colonies at the Earth Moon Lagrange points in high Earth orbit and lunar orbit, and takes their excess population and just shuffles them off to outer space. That's where the excess population winds up. Yes. Well, but they're still governed from Earth, and over time, the people in space start developing their own cultures, their own way of doing things, and it's hinted even start speciating into a new evolution of mankind.
Yeah.
And so tensions grow between the colonists in space and the government on Earth, which is rather aloof and elitist and self-serving. And finally, one group of colonies declares their independence. They name themselves the Principality of Zeon, and they wage this revolutionary war to secede from the Earth Federation. And the Zeon are the first ones to field mobile suits, which are these giant manned bipedal robots. The Federation answers with their own robots based on the Gundam prototype, and hijinks ensue.
Such hijinks.
Now, with the backstory of XSeed, where the inversion starts is, I started from a different direction than Tomino, the creator of Gundam, did. I started from the present day and looked at the crises that were converging to erode our culture. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then I asked myself, where are these going, and what if we threw a couple of curveballs in? So with the XE timeline, what ends up happening to kick it off is a group of tech oligarchs weaponize their private space program and flee Earth to artificially constructed space colonies as society on Earth collapses. So they escape. They then return to reconquer Earth hundreds of years later and re-civilize us. So instead of a rogue space colony or group of colonies fighting a war of independence to secede from a Central Earth government, you have a highly centralized and regimented and rich and powerful space government returning to Earth, which has descended. It did descend to barbarism, but has since rebuilt into more monarchical structures with like scattered warlords. So they're returning to invade and re-civilize us, which means remaking us in their image.
Uh-oh. That doesn't sound like I want that at all.
You don't. Trust me. Because in order to survive in the harshest environment there is up in outer space, the colonists had to adapt and do away with many of the norms that we take for granted on Earth. So like family structure, they've adopted quite a bit of genetic tampering and even cloning to produce a ready-made workforce, for example. And they've got a highly centralized, highly centralized and more collectivist social structure with no real dividing line between, say, commercial and government interests, for example. So they basically want to come down and impose a super Big Brother nanny state ruled from outer space.
Oh my. That sounds like something that would incite war and various conflicts.
It would, and it does.
Shocking.
Yeah, and in this case,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
And in this case, where the giant robots come in is one particularly enterprising self-trained engineer in the colonies takes a piece of bipedal construction equipment, these pretty much glorified exo-powered armors like you'd see in Aliens that were used to construct space colonies, and asks what would happen if we strapped a mini gun to that.
That's a good question. And of course, it creates a combat-ready, eventually, of course, combat-ready mecha thing that was all sorts of exciting to pilot into and to read about.
Hopefully. So those get deployed on Earth, and which leads to escalation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an inversion of Gundam in terms of the socio-political background, but then in terms of the plot as well, I pretty much take the first episode of Mobile Suit Gundam and turn it inside out, and I'll let the audience discover that for themselves. It's in the first sample chapter that's been linked here in the comments. You can find linked from the Indiegogo on my blog, and you can read or listen to at your leisure.
And I did put it in the chat too, just so everyone knows.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So with this, I guess I was thinking about it. How hard of science fiction are you trying to produce here?
Oh, well,
because Gundam actually makes a pretense to being scientifically plausible, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, we should probably discuss the difference between the super robot and real robot subgenres.
I didn't realize there was a real robot subgenre.
That's what Gundam is.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, you have your super robots like I believe Bradford Walker in the chat pointed out Gurren Lagann or Magenzer Z.
Yes.
Daitarn, Gao. Right, where at the almost extreme, they make no pretense of adhering to real life laws of physics. The mech is powered by like the pilot's fighting spirit, and
yep.
When he's in a pinch, you can go into super mode and achieve reality warping effects. That's the super robot genre. Gundam invented what's called the real robot genre by asking, okay, well, what if there were mecha, but the military used them as tools, as weapons in the way that, say, we use tanks or attack helicopters, what would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So he came up with the whole magic system of Minovsky particles to try to justify it, and using AMBAC to justify why a bipedal humanoid robot. So an attempt,
tank.
yeah, an attempt was at least made there to reconcile it with real world science. So I'm following that pattern. The first Combat Frame XSeed book definitely starts with its feet firmly planted in the real robot genre. Like, I do interesting stuff with graphene and carbine, for example.
Ooh.
Yeah, like making miniaturized capacitors and nigh impervious armor, fun little disruptor
Little
weapons that are,
tricks.
yeah,
Yes.
alternately neural disruptors or matter disruptors, depending on your mood.
Okay. So, it struck me with Bradford Walker's thing, and he just said TV tropes pages describing real robots and super robots are actually useful descriptions, and I'll take your word on it. It seemed to me that his work was more super robot. If you've looked at it, what do you know enough about Bradford Walker's Star Knight? Wait, you're editing it, of course you do. Would you say that's more super robot to your real robot?
I
Also,
don't
I
want to
wasn't supposed to
spoil
bring
anything, and
it.
I don't want to risk stepping on editor author confidentiality.
Oh, that's fine.
We can ask him. I mean, he's right here.
Yeah,
Bradford, picking off the week here, buddy. Would you describe it as being more? Would you describe Star Knight as being more super robot than XSeed? Let's see what he says.
yeah. He's in chat. Just for anyone listening in.
Yeah, I'm gonna go straight to the horse's mouth on this one.
Yeah, because
I will
that's
say it
what.
looks awesome. I will say it's
Right.
gonna be great. But yeah.
Right. I was already pretty impressed by the first fight. Impressed enough to get the digital edition. And my promise to him and to you as well, since once this is over, I'll pledge myself to a digital edition. If I like it well enough, I will purchase a physical copy.
Excellent. Oh, okay. Here he is. So, right into Bradford, Reavers of the Void. That's the first book in a series. Is real robot space opera, but it goes super robot when the villains push it there. Thank you, Bradford.
Excellent.
So there it is.
All right, I dig it. So it's like it sounds like it's what is it? Starts small, then goes pretty big, which I do like the idea of that.
Yeah, that's the other approach I'm taking. That's the inverse of Gundam, because with Gundam, what you tend to have is the government produces a super prototype developed by a super scientist or a cabal of super scientists, and
Right.
it then gets watered down into mass production types. What I do is I start with glorified farm or construction equipment and have it evolve and get more complex from there. So the titular XSeed, which is the ultimate combat frame, doesn't appear until near the end of the book, but you see the evolutionary tree sprouting and growing and branching throughout the novel.
I like it, and I do like that sort of. There's a word I want to use, and it's like the idea of it is the expansion of threat, and the progression of how the story goes. Uh, Bradford Walker, by the way, for those who are listening in, says, and you will see more Super Robot as the series goes on. This is an explicit series plot, and I've talked to him about his plot before, and you can watch that stream at your leisure. It is on this channel, and I can absolutely see where it goes. Now, here's an interesting question. I know it's not explicitly robots in a literal sense, but let's say that somebody dons a giant suit of flesh. Is that still a mecha show?
Now we're getting more into Eva territory.
I don't mean it in that sort of whiny, it's the ghost of your parents sense. I mean, it's just a giant suit of armor, like you're fighting a giant. Is it still a mecha show?
Oh, so if you're in a mech, but you're fighting like a kaiju.
Sure, or you grow to giant size explicitly to fight the kaiju, you know, and you would fight as if a mech would. Is it still a mech show?
I would say no. Just
All
shooting
right.
from the hip here.
No, I dig it. So we'll get back onto the subject. So we're running around in glorified farm instruments with implements with miniguns, and eventually, Titan Attack on Titan. Yeah, I was referencing Attack on Titan. Bradford Walker. What's this saying? And so it'll go on to more, I guess, standard military thing. Are you planning on going the full Gundam? What is it, Gunpla route, where it's like all these little designs, and you're selling little parts to the hobby crowd,
Well, I wish, because that's where Gundam makes its money.
right?
But the barrier to entry in terms of startup costs is rather high. So we're taking it one step at a time. I am going to be releasing a set of trading cards.
Ooh.
Yeah, based on the stupendous line art and now colored line art from Art Anon, my conceptual artist, who insists on not being identified. So we will respect his wishes, but he's awesome.
Art Anon is pretty top tier. I am going to have to track him down to his secret hermit cave and pass his trials so that I too may enjoy his work in some day.
If only there was a signal we could shine under a cloud when authors need good concept art. But anyway, I'm sure this message will reach him. So yeah, we're putting out a set of trading cards right now.
Uh-huh.
We're funded for a set of
Out of
4
curiosity,
trading
with
cards.
those trading cards, are you doing like as an art thing, or are you going to try to go for an actual trading card game?
It's not for a game, actually. It's for a reference, because if you look at my blog over the last few months, what I've done is created Jane's Defense style, or for MHQ fans, Burke style entries for each of the combat frames in my first novel.
Yes.
So it gives their stats in real world figures like newtons of thrust and metric tons of weight and
Newtons.
megawatts of power. So what I'm going to have is on the 4 cards and the mecha chosen by reader poll to appear on the first set are the Type 1, Veonteef, Dead Drop, and the Grenzmark 2. You're going to have full color images of them on the obverse, and on the reverse, you're going to have their stats. So, one is just a fun reference, and 2, while you're reading along with the book, and let's say, oh, you get to the Dead Drop Veonteef duel, you can pick up their cards like, oh, okay, so here's how these two stack up.
I like it. I like it a lot, actually, the more I'm thinking about it.
Glad you like it. And yeah, I'm going to be working hard to finalize those designs. I'm going to try to do it tonight. So the goal is to release the first set of trading cards as a perk through Indiegogo tomorrow. And the Indiegogo campaign is going to be the only way to get those.
Ooh.
But then if they sell well enough,
man, Brian.
Tough but fair, because if they sell well, we'll do another set. We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. I do like that idea quite a bit, though, because when you've got I'm working on a sort of space opera series about a guy who's turned into Nanotech, and he fights his ways through the solar system of evil, eventually fighting extrasolar giants. But I've been thinking about how I want to do like the various villains and heroes and all that jazz, and I know that like my hated thing as an author is not world building but world consistency, but I know that's very important for a long-term series. So it's like if I could do like having 50 different variants on like the Medusa Neptunian fighter or whatever, which would be realistic since it's a gas giant with many different kingdoms and each ruled by its own mandarin.
Right.
Or I could do a unified theme that's easy for me, but probably less realistic since every group, since they're all astrologers and all that jazz, would adorn their ships with their certain stars and stuff like that. And having trading cards to basically be a reference, shorthand, is actually quite the brilliant idea.
Thanks. I can't take full credit for it. One of my one of the Gundam for Us folks suggested that to me, and I apologize for not remembering exactly who it was right off the bat, but I get a lot of great advice from a lot of people. That's why we're succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
So blanket thank you to all my backers and everyone in Gundam for Us and all my readers. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah,
I'm glad you like that idea.
Oh yeah, and some of the best stuff comes from like people just like supporting you and listening and providing ideas. I think I rewrote like most of a chapter just because I said to a guy I was dissatisfied, and he just let me talk my way through it until I ended up where I wanted it to be. And of course rewriting it, and it's now better than it was before.
That's the idea.
Yep. So let's see. Bradford has a series going on, and you sound like you have a series as well. Like how far do you want to take this? Like how do you want to scale it up? Scale. That's a good word. Excuse me.
It can also be a dangerous word, but
yes.
Right now, I've got 4 books planned.
Mm-hmm.
I've got all the notes for them. They're ready to go, and so the first novel, which is pretty much done, is Combat Frame XSeed. Then we're doing Combat Frame XSeed CY2 Gaiden, which is the short story that's going to bridge the first and second novels.
Mm-hmm.
That one is going to be available only through a link in the ebook version of the first book. I'm not going to offer it for sale on Amazon, but it's going to be free to people who buy the first book. I'm not going to charge for it.
I do like it.
Good. I got that idea from Chris Fox. Then we're doing the second novel, Combat Frame XSeed Coalition Year 40. And then, depending on how the first one does, I'll probably do the short story bridging books 2 and 3. Book 3 is going to be Combat Frame XSeed S. Then we'll probably do a short story between 3 and 4. And then book 4 is going to be Combat Frame XSeed Double S. Now, that's as far as I've scripted it out, but again, if this really takes off, if people like it, I could definitely see a 5th book.
I do like the idea of it. So Bradford and I did talk about themes and ideas and stuff like that. How do you want let's cast a vision in a sort of thematic way. His seemed to be more in a spiritual threat, where various powers and evils sort of come up. And by the way, if I accidentally mentioned something that was said about this that was said briefly in private, all my memory just kind of like, I've got a very bad memory for this, so I apologize. Sort of like into a grand spiritual threat that they have to fight. Now, yours seems to be more military and economic than spiritual. What sort of things are you planning for it? What's your ideas?
Okay, well, very astute. Yes, the problems in XSeed start social and military and economic, but as we are men who believe in 2 worlds and act accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually Dornall yesterday on Geek Gab who asked this question a different way. He said, are you going to keep this in terms of realism, or are you going to inject some supernatural elements? And I said, well, I don't have to inject supernatural elements into reality. They're already there.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, XSeed proceeds from that. So, but like in real life, the metaphysical, the transcendent is there, but it underlies and supersedes what's going on. But I do give you flashes. I give you peeks behind the curtain every once again. So, for example, one event that happened in the series backstory is during the series of world wars that rocked the earth after the collapse, a caliphate ended up being established that stretched from North Africa through the Middle East, through Europe, and even to the Eastern American and Canadian seaboards. So, yeah, Islam established a transatlantic caliphate that a great percentage of the globe groaned under for 100 years. And
well, they would stretch from Indonesia in that case to North America.
Well, China gets involved though, because
yes,
Christ is always on the move, and by 2050, China will go majority Christian.
Ooh,
which
nice.
Well, and that's real. That is really going to
happen. Oh, I know.
Yeah. So I factor that in. So what ends up happening is actually China had cut them off because China kind of took custody of Africa, of Central and Southern Africa.
Which is happening right now as well, right. just so people know.
Right, so under communism, in the XSeed timeline, the Chinese do colonize Central and Southern Africa for the mineral resources, but then the culture goes majority Christian and the government flips. So a lot of the European refugees who were fleeing the caliphate flee to Asia and Africa and start expat communities there. Now that includes many Christians, including the College of Cardinals and the Roman Curia, who have to evacuate Italy when Rome is seized by the caliphate. Now they flee to Russia, and by virtue of being forced to be in close contact for a few decades, the East-West schism is healed when a Chinese bishop is elected to the sees of both Andrew and Peter and becomes Supreme Patriarch. He declares a crusade to drive the paganism from the Holy Land and Europe.
I love it.
So they do, and Reconquista 2.0 proceeds. The Crusaders are victorious. They flood out of Asia and Africa back to Europe. And in the process, those officers who kept their heads and show good leadership become new Crusader kings. So the monarchies of old are reestablished as Neue Deutschland, Nouvelle France, Nova Italia, and you have new explicitly Christian kingdoms being formed.
You might have just upgraded yourself to like a physical copy. But yeah, keep going. I like this.
Great, yeah. Well, so we have these new kingdoms who are explicitly Christian established. And then the coalition comes into this, and they actually end up allying with the remaining globalist secularists in the Americas and with the caliphate.
Gross.
And using combat frames, they roll over these restored European and Christian monarchies. Just overnight.
And they would, like, provided there isn't like some sort of anti-weapon developed fast enough, there's no real defense against a Gundam, just like there's no real defense against a tank.
Yeah,
and there's even less defense against it because they can just step over your tank-sized punji traps.
Right, and the forces of Earth have tanks at best. They've got some old fighter craft. They're eventually driven onto a leaky flotilla of last century aircraft carriers that are pretty much stuck in international waters in the Atlantic. They call themselves the Earth Governments in Exile. But when your main forces are guys with Molotov cocktails, AK-47s, and Toyota pickup trucks with tripod-mounted 50 cals in the back, Yeah, you're not even taking out a Grenzmark,
the
which is
ISIS special.
yeah, the technicals.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not even taking out a Grenzmark, which is the Zaku analog in XSeed.
I thought Zaku's were pretty armored.
They have high tensile steel armor, but no, they're the grunts because
Oh yes,
Zaku is the Japanese onomatopoeia for the sound of a group of soldiers marching together.
Oh, okay.
So it basically has a connotation of grunt.
I never understood that at all.
Yeah, and Grenzmark is the German equivalent.
Ah, I get you.
That means like stomp, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like it.
Anyway, I'm getting kind of far afield here.
No, that's fine.
So yeah, there is a spiritual dimension to the threat because the coalition is like the revenge of the secular atheist socialist globalist elite who were driven off, but then licked their wounds in space, reaped the bounty of the asteroid field, became wealthier and more powerful than all the emperors and pharaohs of old combined, and came back.
More powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, and they are implicitly making war on Christendom.
Mm-hmm.
They would frame it like that. They'd say, well, we need to rein in this superstitious extremism. Right? But no, the net result is the same.
I'm actually, like, out of curiosity, did you calculate Protestantism into it?
Yep, sure did.
Ooh.
Yeah. For that, we have to take a look at what is going on in America, primarily. So, yeah, what I have happening is what a lot of forecasters predict, that the American empire, as currently constituted, doesn't make it out of this century. So I have the United States, fracturing into 3 or 4, depending on the account, different polities. Starting around 2030.
I'm sorry. I live next to a highway, so if you hear something weird, just push on. I guarantee it will pass.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry about that.
No apology necessary. So, yeah, you have the east and west coasts, which form their own governments. The East Coast, like Washington, Boston, Metroplex, claims the United States of America title, and they call themselves the United States of North America, so as not to offend South Americans. And they essentially become a suzerain state of the Caliphate and merge with the eastern seaboard Canadian provinces. Then you have Pacifica in the West Coast, which encompasses much of California and some of Oregon, Washington, but also parts of Mexico, because during the breakup, they turned to Mexico and the then communist Chinese for assistance, and the Chinese basically end up dominating Pacifica, but they allow Silicon Valley to remain as a semi-autonomous technological R&D economic zone. But for the most part, it becomes majority Mexican national, ruled over by a Chinese elite within the kind of this upper middle class of techies. But then Cascadia, which is on the rain shadow of the Cascade Mountains in Washington, splits away from Pacifica and allies with the FMAS, the Federated Mid-American States, which is an alliance of the Middle American, and it's a conglomeration of Middle, Western, and Southern American states and these central provinces of Canada. And that is where the Protestant communities flourish more. So they retain this stronger sense of limited government and individualism. So again, they're more of a confederation or a federation, and so what they're doing, the way they're fighting back is they have these more scattered militias. I mean, they do have a central government in Kansas City, but
not
the
St.
militias.
Louis. I'm offended.
Yeah, but
I live in St. Louis. I'm just saying, if you ever want to like know everything about the city and why it is perfect to be the capital, I'm just saying.
well, with Kansas City, you kind of got the best of both there. It's kind of model in Washington because it's in two states.
Yeah.
Kind of. But anyway, no, I love St. Louis. I'm just a 3-hour drive from there. I've been there a lot. Always have fun there.
Yep.
Well, there's something special for you. I mean, because I know what are we going to do? Make the capital St. Louis East St. Louis?
No. I assume it'd be cleaned up by then, because I have lived in St. Louis quite a bit of my life, and I've lived in a relatively bad part of St. Louis all of my life, and I know that I know exactly what goes on here, and I won't dare, of course, voice any opinion that would offend the masses, but I know what goes on here. I know.
Yeah. Well, and what's going on there in the time of XSeed is small, well-motivated militias of FMAS citizens holding back incursions from the Sox, which is the pejorative for the members of for the colonists who came back and are trying to meddle on Earth, and their Caliphate lackeys on the Great Plains and in the forests and in the mountains. So they're the FMAS has managed to retain its independence due to controlling key trade routes like warm water ports in the Gulf of Mexico, and also through the efforts of their brave militias, and possibly the toughest character in the whole book. There's this EGE colonel came out of the FMAS militias, and so yeah, the most grizzled, toughest character in the book is a Protestant. The legend circulating with his name is that he uses a knife for a pillow.
What?
He uses a knife for a pillow. Which is said only in hushed whispers.
Right.
Around, yeah.
Well, it's like those stories of like where you keep a gun under your pillow, sort of thing. It's just like a pile of knives he just sleeps on. You know, as long as you don't like move the wrong way, it won't cut you.
Yeah, and I mean it cuts out the middleman because you don't have this pillow getting in your way. You want a knife, you just grab a knife.
Right, exactly.
Right,
you just sort of like grab the assassin and roll him under you, and he's just gone.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking like I don't know much about if you studied about Protestant missionaries, but oftentimes these guys would get like in the middle of like I don't know the Southeast Pacific Southwest, sorry, like Pacific jungles area, like Indonesia and all that jazz, and like it would be like, yes, I have lost 3 kids to terrible jungle diseases, and my left arm has rotted off. But I finally brought one of the natives to salvation. Praise God, it's all worth it. And which is a true statement. I'm not mocking that statement, but I've read some of their biographies, and I am not far off the reservation when it comes to describing their travails.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of people who have the grit and determination to fight off successfully a vastly technologically superior, much more well-funded and well-equipped force.
Absolutely.
Because they really believe in what they're doing.
I do look forward to that sort of thing. I in my story series I'm writing out, I do have a Protestant minister who is on a pirate ship because, of course, pirates need salvation too, but they're more privateers, really. And there's going to be the scene where they have to find a jump gate between Jupiter and Saturn. It's in the Great Red Spot. There's this giant demon in the spot, and he'll come out, and he'll spiritually wrestle with with a vast monster sitting at the center of the red spot, whose storm, of course, hides Earth and all good people from its eyes. It would blast them, of course, at the very glance, until they find the jump gate and, of course, jump away to Saturn. I'm very much looking forward to writing that scene.
Sounds like a spectacular scene.
Oh, yeah.
I will say that we can even go a level deeper. There are hints of transcendent good and evil in XSeed if you know where to look. So
Ooh.
I've discussed the general threat in broad strokes, but I will say this. So okay, you're clearly familiar with my villains. I believe it was the demon Hazaroth you were referring to earlier, the bloodthirsty hunter who won a kingdom in hell by plunging his own people into a series of pointless wars that depopulated his whole region and hunted men for sport. Okay. The main antagonist of Combat Frame XSeed is hands down the most evil character I've ever written.
Now, you say that. But is he like cartoonishly evil? Is he like, are you going grim dark here? You know, this is a loaded statement you're telling me here, man. What am I gonna expect from this guy? Is he like chopping? Is he smoking? I've heard that's very evil in the children cartoons. Does he pollute?
I really don't want to get into spoilers. But I notice you're making a couple of interesting assumptions there. One pretty big one, but
I'm sure I'm making assumptions. You know, I'm just using he in the general sense. I'm just joking with you on the whether or not he pollutes. Of course he pollutes. Otherwise, how will we know he's evil? But
cartoonish. I mean, this I think that's kind of a loaded statement because this book is half informed by a cartoon series, but I don't think that the cartoons have to necessarily be flippant or frivolous. I think cartoons definitely.
Oh, I'm just being facetious with this. Right. I know exactly what inspired it, and this is just my the subtleties and complexities of my humor.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Now we can find our terms. Okay, well, what is the gravest sin? What is the number one sin according to Scripture and the Christian tradition?
Not accepting salvation.
Right, and why?
Because it's a denial of the free gift of the Christ sacrifice, as well as the indwelling of the Holy Spirit and the service to God our Father.
Right, it's a one unforgivable sin. Now, what's the motivation? What is the sin of Satan? What did Milton say?
I haven't actually fully read Paradise Lost, but it's pride.
Yes.
He sought to cast himself above even God in the spiritual hierarchy.
Right. What does C.S. Lewis write in Mere Christianity? The difference between egoism and pride, right? Vanity. Go ahead if you got it.
No, I don't have it. I don't have this one. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, vanity is obsessive concern with what other people think of you, right? It's somewhat sycophantic. It's shallow. Pride is worse. It's the chief of the deadly sins, because the difference is, pride says, I don't care what anyone else thinks of me.
Excuse me.
Sure, excuse. Because I have no regard for them as people, as children of God. I have no respect for their opinion. And I am qualitatively better than those people. That's pride, and that's extremely dangerous to say the least, because one, it's the sin that'll lead you to that rejection of salvation, because, well, I don't need it, I'm fine, right? Quicker than anything else. So, whereas all of my other
heard that quite often in real life, like it's not uncommon at all with the unsaved.
Oh no, it's everywhere, and that's how you can tell when the evil one is at work. That's the red flag. You just have this overweening, towering arrogance. And my past villains, even Azeroth, even Von Mordecai, who sought to make himself a god because he thought that only he could help slash lead slash save humanity. Even they did think they were doing good. They or at least were amoral and were just satisfying carnal pleasures on a more bestial level.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the main antagonist of XSeed actually embraces objective evil as a good.
Ooh.
Out of pride.
So is it direct? So it's direct defiance of God through his evil actions, or is
Yeah.
he like saying, you know what, if he sees a puppy in the street, I could pet the puppy or I could punt the puppy into this kindergartner's, and then it isn't so much like he specifically chooses punting the puppy into a bunch of kindergartners because it causes more pain.
Yeah, exactly. It's I hate the kindergartners. I'm ambivalent toward the puppy. The puppy could be a useful tool to my ends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I ran through I drove through a playground full of kindergartners and ran down a dozen of them on my way to this meeting. Yeah. So
But admittedly, that, just so you know, that does get a like it becomes so extreme that it will become humorous if you let it.
right. That's why
It's
this
like,
character also. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, like it's like some things I've read where it's like, yes, I'm so evil. You know, here are my kindergartner slippers and my kindergartner, dressing gown and all all these things, which of course, but then like the guy takes it too far, and I'm just like sort of pulling apart various things where it's like it's still living, breathing kindergartners as his dinner jacket and shoes or something, and it's like, dude, at this point, like fire your haberdasher, please, because he's just making a hat of kindergartners. Like it gets very one note. It pushes it all the way to humor because the dead babies have piled up so high.
Well, from a beta read reaction, no, I don't go there. And in fact, this character would consider that thinking too small.
Excellent. That sounds like something I'll appreciate when he shows up. And of course, does he show up in a specialized Gundam? I'm sorry, combat frame, to which fight the heroes in a dramatic one-on-one duel, preferably in the middle of a thunderstorm or in
No.
space.
Well, I will tell you, this character is much more of the chess master, backroom deal maker, kind of political animal. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so let's establish this. We already know that we have this coalition of space colonies that is the wealthiest, most powerful government ever conceived. We also know that governments account for more human deaths than anything but diseases. So,
Oh no, we've topped diseases one or two times.
so if you are an absolute misanthrope motivated by all-consuming pride and hatred of mankind, that would be the ultimate tool for enacting your fiendish plans, would it not?
Oh, absolutely. Though I'm sure that if it's anything, it's just reminding me of Lelouch, the Britannia from Code Geass. Chess master, overwhelming sense of pride, dramatic sense of irony, or something like that. Chess master.
Well, there's a hint as to who this character is, and if you know your Japanese, look for a hint of a god complex in the name.
Ooh, I like it. That
But
does satisfy me.
yeah, no, I won't rule out the possibility of this character actually going into combat, but that would be spoiler territory, so I'm backing out.
Hiss. Which is a pity. I'm not a big I don't worry myself too much about spoilers. though I am very much looking forward to this, and as well as you and Bradford Walker's thing. If you wanted to, if you've got other people who are in the Gundam for us sort of thing, and actually producing a book that you think will be very viable, very acceptable to a man of not quite wealth, but certainly taste, uh, do do send him my way, or her. You know,
Indeed.
and I'll be happy to talk with them as I'm doing to you. I am enjoying this very much. So we've got all the world there. Are there any space colonies who have rebelled against the satanistic and evil without any regard to OSHA regulations? People.
That's a perfect reference. There is one. The colonies in L3, the third Earth Moon Lagrange point,
Mm-hmm.
which were largely settled by folks of Western European and American extraction. So again, they've retained more of this individualistic, limited government, free enterprise ideal.
Yes.
And yeah, of the 5 Lagrange points, they're the only one that does not sign the Systems Over Terrestrial Coalition Charter to go metal on Earth. So
Is them?
yeah, only L3.
Yes. Only L3. Yes.
And they're really opposing the coalition more out of enlightened self-interest because they can put 2 and 2 together. They say, okay, well, the members of the coalition strove for centuries to stabilize a standard of living on Earth. As soon as they did, and they had some free time on their hands, what did they do? They invaded Earth and started mucking about there. So we know when these people are bored, they get handsy with their military. They start
right.
wars. They start adventuresome wars of conquest. So it doesn't take a big leap to figure out that when they're done with Earth, they're going to come for us because they can't stand anything that's not them.
Yep.
So we are going to secretly, we're going to publicly decry the actions of Sanzen Kaimura, the director of the coalition's military, while on the back end, secretly feeding the EGE money and resources under the table on Earth.
I like it. And that's actually like a completely legitimate strategy. Let your enemy exhaust himself fighting wars to no end, which I'm sure is a bad translation of Machiavelli's excellent Italian. Excuse me.
It's the man. But there's a wrinkle here because the aforementioned Sanzen Kaimura, he was chosen for his position because unlike almost all of the Sox, he's a bit of the odd man out because he actually has studied military history. He's read his Sun Tzu. He's read his Pericles and Herodotus. He's read the Five Rings. So, he's read his Machiavelli. So what he does is, while the wife and daughter of L3's prime minister are on a shuttle traveling between colonies, Sanzen has his forces detain the shuttle and take the prime minister's wife and daughter into protective custody.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, he is not able to rip out his own heart. And, excuse me, I was taking a drink of water and it went down the wrong tube.
With what can we wash it down when we choke on water?
Right, exactly. It's like it's the worst thing ever, and there's like this bubble just above my speech box. Anyway, vocal cords. You should see me write sometime. I'll just sit there and it's like, you know what? I was thinking about this word for 5 minutes. I know what this word. I want to use this exact word, and I can define this word. I could probably spell this word, but I can't write this word. Anyway. He can't rip out his own heart and say, this is clearly a ploy. Do your worst, and I shall do my best, which is too much to expect of any man.
Yeah, what Sanzen does do is mail one of the pink silk ribbons that the prime minister's daughter is fond of wearing in her hair to the prime minister. No note, no demands, just the ribbon.
Mm-hmm.
No one will get the hint.
Exactly, and it's all about them hints. I've lived among Asians long enough to understand all that jazz.
Yeah, so that's actually what sets up the first book, because Prime Minister Friedlander's son Zieg,
Mm-hmm.
his oldest
Zeke?
child,
Zeke
yeah,
Zion? Yes.
yeah, Zieg Friedlander, he resigns his commission, which he just been granted. He's a recent graduate of the L3 Military Academy.
Of course.
Resigns to hook up with this underground resistance group based in L3 called Zodiac, which
Mm-hmm.
is it's an acronym through the French for basically the demilitarized colonies. And he launches an unsanctioned rescue attempt into the lion's den to get his mother and sister back. And that's where we open the first book.
Ah, yes. And that's an excellent first chapter. Uh, I keep forgetting you have an audiobook of it already, otherwise I'd offer to read it. I do look forward to this book coming out, and I do look forward to Bradford Walker's Star Knight saga whenever it does come out. So you're saying that you want to release this book around January 1st of next year?
As close to the first of the year as possible. I have to look for the most opportune day, but yeah, early January 2019. Now, as an added bonus, an incentive for my Indiegogo backers, if you back the project and pick a perk, all perk levels get the ebook version of Combat Frame XSeed 2 months early, so you'll get that in November before Amazon.
Mm-hmm. I do like that. Though I fear that might spoil me, and now I have to wait the long march between that and the hard copy, which I will surely purchase.
Thank you.
Which, by the way, I am. Though I have not I'm still writing the script and deciding how I want to do this. I am doing announcing. I'm not using this to announce anything because this is public knowledge on Facebook and the email parts I'm part of. I will of course review this book if I enjoy it very much, and I'll on the new show I'm going to call Reading Rainbow Emperor.
Well, I'm delighted. I do enjoy your reviews.
Thank you very much. I think I wish I enjoyed. I liked Hymn of the Pearl. I wish I enjoyed Soul Dancer more. And I loved Nethreel, which I linked in the description below.
I'm going to make some people jealous here, but I have to say, your Ethereal review is my favorite of all the reviews.
Where I wrote it, where I got weirded out writing it, and I wrote it as an opera.
Yeah, the operatic version. You're like, here's where the bassoons come in.
Yes, exactly. And here's where Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope, as the two demon clowns, show up, because you had demon clowns in it, which tickled me pink. I loved it. And then of course I of course declared that they were juggalos, which I was much more into at the time.
Demon clowns tickled Ben Wheeler pink.
Yes, exactly. Clowns do that for me. I have the book I'm writing, Cyber Gothic, which I will be to your taste, I believe.
I love the title.
Oh yeah. The fact that no one had done this so far, just sort of feeling, where the hero, after his, and this is spoilers, but I don't mind, his father and his exorcist friend die, defeating the chief demon of the ghost that's haunting and murdering his family in a far future where death is all but unknown. He retreats to the circus, where he disguises himself as a clown. And the plan is to bring in the circus to hide his secretive attacks on the ghost and her many made bodies. Robot made. while dressed as a clown with a 3-foot-long neon purple codpiece, who prances around. The codpiece can move on its own, and it saves his life at least once. I just need to figure out where it saves his life.
And it gives him the support he so desperately needs.
Oh yeah, I give it to him in the beginning as a gag because everything was a bit too serious. So I lighten the mood a bit where like he has to find his friend who is a mentalist, and of course as a magician, mentalist sort of thing, he hides himself within the circus, and so he lets people who want to seek him find him, or you find him randomly because he put hypnotic gestures into various cards and stuff like that. You know, typical magician shtick. And so one of the things is a codpiece tailor who tricks him into donning such a huge codpiece that will pull him in the direction of his friend's mentalist parlor. And so he's stuck there, and like the thing, like everyone's mocking him for it as he has to walk through the circus. And of course, he's nearly brought to tears, and the thing wipes away his tears to his horror. Even as his friends laugh at him. And I don't know why, but once I hit on that idea of mocking my own character with a codpiece of unusual size and color, I have been in love with the idea ever since for this book.
How novel! Well,
exactly.
Look at that.
Oh, I hope so. I've actually been thinking about this Indiegogo stuff for my own works, but I have. It's I suppose it's great advertisement. But I am reticent to do it because I have yet to. I'll probably do it for my Jasper Silver series of books, but because most of my novels are standalone, I'll probably hold off until I'm ready to unveil Jasper Silver, the nanotech boy, to the world and all his troubles, which include
we
mortality.
Breathlessly await that day.
What? Oh, yes.
Breathlessly await that day.
Oh, yes.
But take your time. Do put in the work you need to put in.
Oh, absolutely. I'm having, like, I've written the first novel, but I'm having to, like, shuffle it. So I'm going to do in media res back forward. But where previously, I think it had been grinding on too slow. And all the pieces weren't stitched together right. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you've measured the garment perfectly. Like, here's the sleeves and here's the collar and all that jazz. I just need to stitch it together better. But the idea is sound and as delicious, I hope, as your own thing. Though I don't know. Does it count if he like absorbs an asteroid belt? Not an asteroid belt. Sorry, an asteroid to grow big enough to fight Mecha fist to fist.
Well, if he's fighting Mecha, then yeah.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure.
I think the benchmark is you have to have robots of some kind.
Absolutely. Good. Because I've got this. This will be my last anecdote. I've got the scene I really desperately want to write where his best friend is turned evil because his best friend's best friend died. And he was able to be turned to dark side and despair through it. And seeing, of course, the death of worlds and the evil of the spirit and all that jazz. And so he's going to his best friend who's turned evil is going to capture a ship used by the good characters, and he sees just this guy walk out without a spacesuit, and he's like, oh no. And his friend just grabs an asteroid and absorbs it into him, turning himself like 12 foot tall and with orbital rings around him that he just fires at people. And he's like, so this is what our enemies see before they die. This is absolutely the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And, I've seen true evil. But of course, he has some trick to capture the hero. Anyway, enough about me. So we're going into the twilight hours of this broadcast. What are your final words about Combat Frame XSeed?
It's going to be fun, which as always is the number one concern.
Absolutely.
We talk a good game about philosophy, metaphysics, superversive, but at the end of the day, the book's primary purpose is to entertain, but we want pleasures to be illicit pleasures. We want them to uphold beauty and truth. And sometimes there can be beauty in showing people ugly things like war and treachery and deceit, and
Mm-hmm.
shining the light of truth on them, that
Oh yes.
we may know their works. So, but again, I'm also going to blow stuff up.
Hey, that's important. Michael
So
Bay
yeah,
wouldn't be where he is today without blowing stuff up many times.
yeah. I mean, people give him a hard time, but he's highly successful. He's good at what he does, and he
Yep.
knows his audience. So I would again encourage anyone listening to go now and support the Combat Frame XSeed Indiegogo, linked in the show notes below.
I'll be doing that myself the second you put up those
Thank
trading
you.
cards.
Thank you. Yeah, should be tomorrow. In addition to the trading cards, we've got tons of other perks. We've got, of course,
Mm-hmm.
the ebook, which everybody who takes any perk level gets 2 months early. We've got the trade paperback, which will be out in January. We've got posters of Todd Everhart's excellent cover. And then, if you want to be a high roll, if you want to get into the gold and platinum tier of perks, not only do you get the ebook early, but we've got one of these left. We've got one chance to collaborate with me to produce a combat frame, which will be included in a canonical XSeed story. We have one gentleman who already took that perk. He could not be happier with his decision. We had a great time creating his mech together. That one's going to be in the short story. And we've got a place on the book's dedication page. And then finally, because I've had so many of my wonderful readers get in touch with me asking to have dinner with me or ask, hey, I'm in town. I want you to sign my copy of Secret Kings. I decided to monetize that. So our highest tier is dinner and private signing with me.
Yes, yes.
On me, I will purchase your meal. The venue has to be within a 3-hour driving distance of Peoria, Illinois, and is subject to approval. And I'll also purchase you one adult beverage. You can
Wait,
keep
you're in
going after that,
Imperial?
but yeah, but any further drinks will be on your dime. And I'll sign your book. We can talk shop. We can talk mecha, comics, politics, LG, anything you want.
I love it. I absolutely love it. But you're in Imperial. That's not far from St. Louis, is it?
It is 3 hours.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking of something else. But is that why Chicago isn't like the chief space of evil?
I know it's pretty close.
It is pretty close. But I'm
Dig
just
the
saying,
moat.
like you said, socks. I was thinking, is that just a pejorative term for like a Chicago gangster?
No, it's pejorative for, remember, the Systems Over Terrestrial Coalition.
I know, but like you could have done the White Sox.
I could have.
Or was it the Red Sox? Wait, which Sox? Cubs.
I don't follow sports. I'm gonna be honest. I don't have time with all the writing.
That's fine. Me neither.
That's why they went over my head at first.
Well, I work at a restaurant, so sports is played, and I start picking up lingo,
Yeah.
though I don't dare delve into the deep, dark, murky depths of fantasy football.
Yeah, that's role playing for jocks. Now, I will say, in addition to a gun for us, another hashtag I started is Dig the Moat, which is a campaign to start at Lake Michigan and dig a moat around the borders of Cook County and cast Chicago off into Lake Michigan, where it can be its own little island prison and no longer part of Illinois.
Yes, I actually absolutely agree with that. They Black Sox. Ooh, I actually like that Black Sox. No, it's being a St. Louisan. They recently tried to put toll bridges, and I don't know where it is, but the toll bridges haven't shown up between St. Louis and Illinois. That has gotten a lot of people very angry over here because we view it as Chicago's corruption starting to mess with our smooth jazz,
It is.
and we won't be happy campers, and will of course starve Illinois of our business.
Please invade and send help.
No, but you can come over here anytime you like and buy cigarettes to sell at apparently dollars profit.
And fireworks. Don't forget the
Yes.
fireworks.
Actually, that's the funniest thing. Like anytime I travel, I drive around quite a bit, and anytime I see like fireworks everywhere. But Missouri, like St. Louis and stuff like that, doesn't have any fireworks within city limits,
Yeah.
which I consider quite the pity. Oh well. Our city troubles are, of course, not pertinent, but certainly what is the word I want? Influential on how we view the world. Surely, since I did put St. Louis as the foundation for the giant mega city that supports the space elevator, Gateway Space Elevator. And the arch is bent and broken, leaning against one wall of the chief root system of the space elevator as it dives into the geothermal generators of the Earth, which I'm very proud of. You should have a scene like that where like the people fight it around the base of the arch as it is collapsed. Sadly,
Oh,
just
I
saying.
am sad now. But in XSeed, Chicago, of course, falls to the coalition, and their main combat frame factory on Earth is located there. So it's occupied territory in the post future.
I am glad to hear that beyond all reason. Uh,
Also, I was going to say, I just remembered, you asked for other members of A Gundam for Us you could talk to. Talk to Raul Nyanzi. He's got a Gundam for Us project that he's been bouncing around for a while. Sounds interesting.
The second, I don't, I think, the second he gets serious with it, send him my way.
Okay.
I'll drop a line to him too. Like even though I do love just talking about ideas and concepts and stuff like that, I do consider myself a professional writer, as I'm sure you do as well.
What do you mean?
And sorry, what?
No, I know what you mean. And yeah, Raul is very, by his own admission, still in the planning phase.
Yes.
So I think he made a wise decision.
Yes, and like I'll talk about anything, but do have that skin in the game. I need more skin in the game. I need some blood in the cut.
There you go, folks. If you're gonna come on a Superversive stream, have at least a prototype to show off.
Yes.
Bring something
to wow me so I can go, but something like that, like you have here today. Though next week is going to be a very relaxing week, since I have ordered Anthony Marchetta to read Jake and the Dynamo, The Wattage of Justice, which I believe is still the most recent offering by Superversive Press, my beloved and generous publishers, as well as watch the Count of Monte Cristo anime, Gankutsuo. Did you ever watch that?
No, I did not.
It has
really quick. Is that D.G. Davidson's project?
Yes, Jake and the Dynamo is by D.G.D. Davidson, and I'll actually be for my Reading Rainbow Emperor series. That'll be my first attempt since I have most recently read it. I am dedicating myself, just so you know, to our works with occasional forays into blasting Harry Potter or Mortal Instruments or something, whatever's popular, right? And just like exorcising them so I get views, so I can then, of course, talk about what I really want to do. Though, of course, when I apply this philosophy to my writing, I'll be incredibly unhappy and my muse will pout.
You'll have that.
I don't want that, though. Anyway, and the sooner I can get into fight with Harry Potter people, the better. Though I'm sure some of my own people will turn on me and rend me limb from limb for it. And I look forward to your Combat Frame. The links are in the description below. I'm looking forward to Bradford Walker. Once Raul Nyanzi puts out something that I can get my teeth into, I'll be happy to look forward to that. If any Pulp Rev, any Superversives, any Noble Bright, anything good, fair, honorable, truthful, virtuous, and seeking the Most High God, I will be happy to give you more than a few seconds of my time. Brian Niemeier, thank you so much for coming on. It has been absolutely gangbusters to talk to you about this stuff. And I wish you every bit of luck of your already 280% successful Indiegogo campaign.
My pleasure. God bless.
You too, sir. Thank you.